I heard 3 words and felt winter crack. You're not invited. My Christmas shattered by my daughter-in-law. After 3 cruel words, my son just watched forever. The sentence lived in the air like frost that refused to melt. I stared at the lemon slice on my water glass and tried to swallow, but the rind tasted of metal. Around us, the brunch clatter kept its cheerful rhythm, a soundtrack for people whose families still worked. Across the table, my son kept his eyes down, as if the omelet might save him from choosing sides. Silence can hollow a family out. Stay with me, and you'll see how boundaries can rescue love from ruin. I didn't argue. I nodded as if I agreed with the practicality of space, with the logistics of guest lists and a house that would be so full. But somewhere under my ribs, something old and tired sat up. I pressed my napkin flat and felt the faint ridge of paper I had tucked there before leaving home. A folded catering invoice with a pencil notation no one was meant to see. I left it untouched, a seed I would not water yet. The restaurant was all glass and light, a place Jennifer loved because it photographed well. She leaned back, blonde hair arranged like a magazine spread, and lifted her mimosa. "We'll celebrate in January, Martha," she said, as if moving the holiday were moving a dentist appointment. David nodded without looking at me. The boy who once scraped his knees on our driveway and ran inside crying, "Mom!" now measured me the way you measure a cost. I took a breath that tasted of citrus and quiet. "January sounds fine," I said, and the words didn't belong to me yet. Outside, the sun struck the parked cars into mirrors. David drove with both hands on the wheel, a habit from the year he failed his first road test. He kept the radio low, as if music might apologize for him. "Mom, it's just 1 year," he said finally. His voice tried for calm and landed on pleading. "We want something intimate." I watched the blur of storefronts pass like years you misplace and only find when you're downsizing. "Of course," I said. "Intimacy is important." He didn't hear the edge. He pulled into my driveway and left the engine running, already halfway gone. In my living room, afternoon light arranged itself into long died. I learned that a house can be too big for one heartbeat. I sold the one with our heights penciled on the pantry door and bought a small condo that didn't echo when I coughed. I let my son keep his pride by inventing a story about a business uptick and called the money I sent help instead of habit. Help is a bridge. Habit is a leash. I didn't feel the difference until the leash burned. On my phone, a text arrived from Jennifer, cheerful as confetti. "David forgot to ask, can you handle the catering from Jeppe's again? Same as last year, 30 guests. Even though you won't be there." Even though. 2 words that turned a request into an arrangement. I set the phone face down on the table and listened to the clock. Robert used to say clocks don't keep time, they keep truth. On the table beside the clock lay my laptop, open to the bank portal. The cursor pulsed beside next month's mortgage transfer like a little heartbeat asking permission to keep beating. I have a softness for habits that pretend to be necessities. They keep you warm while they steal the winter wood. I clicked cancel and felt nothing happen in the room. No thunder, no alarms, just a small unhooking inside me, as if a clasp had finally found its release. I opened another tab and wrote a brief email to the catering manager. "Please cancel the holiday order for the Harper residence." I didn't explain. Explanations are for the hopeful. I logged into the school portal and removed my payment authorization there, too. The browser asked if I was sure. I answered myself by closing the laptop. That evening, I ate soup and buttered toast like a child who trusted simple food. The folded invoice still rode in my purse, its edges soft from my thumb. I thought of the last Christmas at their house, the one with the 6-foot tree and the professional photos and my cookies left in the kitchen because the caterer has petty spores. I had smiled for the camera and stood where I was placed. The picture on the mantle would show a family complete, and only the person who paid the bill would know where to stand to stay out of the frame. When the phone started to ring the 3rd day, the sound was a bird that kept forgetting the same note. David left a voicemail about a tuition payment that hadn't gone through. Jennifer texted about a caterer misunderstanding. No one asked if I tell him I wanted to understand exactly what was left of the future I kept giving away. But first, I stood at the window and watched the evening lay itself across the street. Some decisions want witnesses. The sky was the only one I trusted enough to keep the secret until I was ready to live it out loud. At midnight, the condo went quiet in that special way buildings do when the world has finished its errands. I lay awake and counted the ways I had made myself smaller for people I loved, drafting their holiday budgets in my head, nodding through their speeches about networking, pretending not to hear the distance in Martha spoken instead of Mom. There are tears you don't shed because they feel wasteful. And then there is the dry, clean ache that comes when you finally stop spending yourself. I turned on the bedside lamp and wrote 3 words on a notepad. No more now. In the morning, I pressed those words into my pocket like a talisman and walked to the kitchen for coffee. When the first ring of the day came, I didn't flinch. I let the machine take it. Somewhere in the near future, I could hear the shape of a different life. Porch screens ticking in a salt breeze, a kettle singing over a small stove, grandchildren who came to visit because they wanted to, not because their parents needed a babysitter during a catered party. Keep watching with me. Somewhere between losing a seat at their table and setting one for myself, there is a lesson worth staying to hear. She had been the invisible benefactor for 5 long years, and no one at that brunch table had the faintest idea. The mortgage on their Tudor-style house, the tuition bills for Westlake Academy, even the glossy catering that Jennifer claimed as her signature touch. All of it had been sustained by transfers I made each month without a single word of acknowledgement. It is easy to pretend success when someone else keeps your foundation steady. I had allowed them that illusion, telling myself it was dignity, when in fact it was silence that ate away at me. The first time David asked for help, his voice had cracked in the way it once did when he admitted to crashing his bicycle. "Just a month or 2, Mom," he had said, eyes darting away. His wife sat beside him, nodding with a mask of sympathy. My desk grew thicker with receipts and statements, a paper trail of devotion hidden in plain sight. I never once mentioned it, not to David, not even to my sister, because pride is a fragile thing. Pride also hides in unexpected places. Jennifer's pride came dressed in designer shoes and salon highlights, mine in the restraint of never speaking up. I told myself that if they believed their life was earned, they would stand taller, but I watched them lean harder instead, their lifestyle growing while my savings shrank. Still, I never pulled back. Perhaps it was the memory of Robert's hands, rough from work, yet gentle when he lifted our son. He would have wanted me to give David a chance. Yet sometimes chances rot into chains, and you don't notice until your wrists are raw. The hardest moments were not the transfers, but the gatherings. Holidays filled with laughter that carried just past me. Conversations that skipped over my seat. One Christmas I arrived with cookies made from Robert's mother's recipe, only to be told the caterer had provided petite fours. My cookies sat unopened in the kitchen. A ghost of tradition in a house that no longer needed me for anything but the checkbook. I smiled through photographs, smiled through dinners, and drove home in silence. The next day, I paid their January mortgage. Love, I thought, was supposed to be unconditional. But was invisibility the price? Invisible mothers are convenient. We cook, we give, we fold into the background, and in return we are mentioned as afterthoughts. "We'll do something in January," Jennifer had said at brunch, as if penciling me in between social events. I thought of the $275,000 I had already spent since Robert's passing, more than half of my retirement, poured into a life that barely left me a seat at the table. And still I nodded. Still I smiled. Still I carried the burden alone. Some people carry grudges. I carried invoices. Both weigh heavy, but only one can bankrupt you in the end. One evening I stood in my condo, staring at the framed picture of David as a boy holding his father's hand. That boy had once looked at me with trust so absolute it frightened me. Now, the man would not even meet my eyes when his wife delivered the verdict. No Christmas for me. I thought of the invoices, the receipt table. Only the hand that signed checks. I saw it now as clearly as the tea ring on Robert's chair. Some roles, once accepted, consume you whole. I told myself stories to make sense of it. That the children's smiles were repayment. That Jennifer's occasional thank you for babysitting meant she cared. That David's silence meant he was torn, not indifferent. Stories keep you warm, but lies don't heat a room. I sat one night with the folder spread before me. Every dollar accounted for. It wasn't the numbers that stung. It was the absence of my name. No one knew whose sacrifice stitched those bills together. I had erased myself so completely that even I forgot, until Jennifer's 3 words brought me back. The day I finally admitted it, the air in the condo felt different, lighter, sharper. I was not just Martha, the widow, the mother, the grandmother. I was the financier of their illusion, the sponsor of their pride, the ghost at their table. Recognition had never been demanded, so it was never offered. But a reckoning was coming. They thought my role permanent, as fixed as the transfer dates. They had no idea that habits can end with a single keystroke. And when it did, would they look for me? Or only for the money that vanished with me? The night I canceled the mortgage transfer, the condo was hushed, as if the walls themselves held their breath. For 5 years, the payment had been as regular as sunrise. A ritual no one acknowledged but everyone depended on. With one click, the cycle broke. I sat still, waiting for thunder or guilt to arrive, but only silence came. The glow of my laptop screen dimmed, and for the first time in years, I felt taller in my own chair. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped into the night, a reminder that alarms belong to other people's emergencies, not mine anymore. The first call came the next morning. David's voice trembled just enough to show fear, but not enough to reveal shame. "Mom, the school says the tuition didn't clear. Must be some mistake. Call me back." He didn't ask how I was. Didn't wonder why. Only the problem mattered. I let the voicemail blink red on my phone. That afternoon, Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. Comes when chains fall away, even if they leave marks. That night, I opened an old photo album. Robert and I, on our wedding day. The tilt of his smile caught forever in sepia. David as a toddler, cheeks sticky with ice cream, his laughter free of the burdens he now carried. I turned the pages slowly, reminding myself that love had existed before obligation swallowed it. The photos smelled faintly of dust and lavender, grounding me in a truth I had almost forgotten. My worth was not measured in deposits and transfers. It lived in memories, in sacrifices freely made, not endlessly demanded. I traced Robert's handwriting in the margins and whispered, "It stops now." 3 days passed before I answered. David's voice was raw with anger this time. "Mom, the mortgage company called. The payment didn't go through." I steadied my tone, surprised by its calm. "That's right." Silence stretched across the line, brittle as glass. "What do you mean, that's right? There must be a mistake." "No mistake," I replied. "I've decided not to make the payment this month." His voice cracked open into disbelief. "You know we're counting on you. You can't just stop." Like I was counting on being included at Christmas? The words slipped out, sharp as glass, before I could soften them. He sputtered, caught off guard. "So this is punishment? Over one holiday? That's childish, Mom." Heat rose in my chest, but it clarified instead of burning. "Childish? I've paid your mortgage for 5 years. I've paid your children's tuition. I funded every catered Christmas. And the one time I expected to be included, I was dismissed like an inconvenience." His silence was louder than shouting. "Mom, this isn't fair," he said finally. "What about the kids?" "Their education is your responsibility," I said. "Not mine. Not anymore." My voice did not waver, though my hand shook when I set down the phone. Jennifer called minutes later, her tone laced with fury disguised as reason. Martha, you're being selfish, petty. You can't pull the rug out because you feel excluded. We have plans, obligations. This is bigger than you. I stared at the dark window, my reflection faint against the night. Selfish. Petty. Words meant to shrink me back into silence, but the threads snap loose. And yet, beneath the relief, questions crept in. How far would they go to pull me back? Would David's anger harden into cruelty? Would Jennifer's entitlement twist into threats? One night, as I folded laundry, a sharp knock rattled the door. My chest tightened, certain it was them. But when I opened it, only silence greeted me. No one stood there, only a plain envelope on the mat. Inside was nothing but a blank sheet of paper. No handwriting, no message. I held it under the light, searching for meaning where none existed. Perhaps a prank. Perhaps a warning. Perhaps nothing at all. I tucked it into the folder with the financial records, a strange addition to the story I hadn't finished telling. Some shadows wait longer to reveal themselves. The phone rang again, relentless. I turned it off, slid it into the drawer, and stepped out onto my balcony. December air bit at my skin, sharp and clean. Across the street, windows glowed with Christmas trees I would not sit beside this year. Instead, I pictured the ocean Robert had promised me. Waves erasing footprints. A sky wide enough to hold grief and healing together. No more, I said again, to the night, to myself, to the future. The words didn't just echo. They settled, solid, as if the walls of my condo had finally learned a new name for me. Free. When Robert died, the world tilted in ways I couldn't immediately name. Grief has a way of loosening the ground beneath your feet. And in that unsteady season, David and his wife moved in close with words that seemed compassionate. "Mom, you shouldn't stay in that big colonial alone," David had said, his hand resting on mine across the kitchen table. Jennifer's nod was quick, practiced, like a real estate agent who knew her pitch. "There are wonderful condos by the lake. No yard, no stairs, lots of activities. Perfect for you." Perfect sounded like a cage, but I let them talk. The house Robert and I built over 30 years was too full of his voice. Pencil marks. The rooms without echoes. The bed too wide. Grief sat in every corner, and generosity had left me with less than I could afford. The first months after the move, they called often. Sunday dinners, school plays, soccer matches. I was the grandmother who still had a seat at the table. Then, invitations began to thin. One week, they forgot to tell me about Jack's recital. Another, Jennifer hinted that my clothes were a bit dated. She wrinkled her nose at my stew and murmured that the children were used to organic now. Each comment was a stone laid quietly in a wall I hadn't noticed until it stood between us. I paid the bills, brought gifts, and smiled through it all. But the wall grew taller. Then came the first request. "The business is in a tight spot, Mom," David said, eyes sliding away. "Could you help with the mortgage this month? Just until a commission clears." I agreed before the sentence ended. 1 month became 2, then 6, then permanent. Transfers grew regular. Obligations stacked like bricks. I told myself it was temporary, that the business would recover. But my balance shrank, and their lifestyle swelled. Jennifer pressed for private schools, renovations, vacations. Each request came wrapped in urgency, framed as necessity. And each time I nodded, signed, transferred. My silence was a currency they spent freely. One Christmas, I arrived with cookies baked from Robert's mother's recipe, the scent of nutmeg and memory rising like prayer. Jennifer frowned at the platter. The caterer has petty fours, Martha. We don't need these. My cookies vanished into the kitchen, untouched, as if my history was less polished, less presentable. Gifts I had chosen with care were unwrapped with distracted thanks, overshadowed by grander presents I had unknowingly financed. At dinner, I sat at the far end beside an uncle who couldn't hear me, my words drifting into empty air. When I spoke Robert's name, Jennifer cut in. Let's keep things upbeat. That night, I drove home with tears hidden in the dark. Still, the next morning, I pressed confirm for their January mortgage, because that was the pattern. Insult, exclusion, would never say no, and in that space, they built their world on my silence. What began as grief-born generosity hardened into exploitation, and I was complicit, because I let it. Until that brunch, when 3 words cracked the shell. As I sat in Robert's old chair, looking at the financial records stacked like a silent testimony, I finally saw the roots of the problem. It wasn't just about Christmas. It wasn't even about money. It was about how I had allowed myself to become their foundation, invisible and unthanked. The house I sold, the savings I drained, the holidays I financed, all of it grew from one mistake, confusing love with obligation. And now, with half my retirement gone and half my dignity spent, I understood what must happen next. I would not keep building a house that buried me inside. The knock on my door came sharp, insistent, as if the wood itself owed them answers. When I opened it, David stood there, face tight with anger, and Jennifer hovered behind him with arms folded across her chest. They didn't greet me, didn't ask to come in. David simply pushed past, his voice clipped. Mom, what's going on? The mortgage is past due, the school called, the caterer says the order was canceled. You can't just cut us off without warning. His words tumbled out like accusations, each one heavier than the last. Jennifer's silence carried the sharper blade, disdain in every glance. I closed the door calmly and turned to face them. Hello to you too, David. My voice was steady, and even that surprised me. Jennifer didn't bother with courtesy. You know why we're here. This isn't acceptable. We can't handle these bills without you. I gestured toward the sofa. Sit, both of you. Let's talk. David didn't move. I don't want to sit. I want to know why you suddenly decided to stop helping us. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the folder I had placed on the table earlier, the one I'd avoided opening in front of anyone. Now was the time. I set the folder between us. Here, every payment, every transfer, every expense I've covered for the last 5 years. It totals $276,340. David blinked as if the number was foreign. He opened the folder, eyes scanning line after. Rather than a mother? The room went silent. David's fingers tightened around the folder. We can't afford the house on our own. The kids' tuition. What are we supposed to do? His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. You'll have to decide, I said evenly. Downsize? Transfer schools? Find steady jobs? Do what millions of families do every day. Live within your means. I won't keep sacrificing my future so you can live a life you can't afford. Jennifer scoffed, rising to her feet. So that's it? You're punishing us because you feel left out of one holiday? My eyes locked on hers. This isn't punishment. This is correction. You chose to exclude me. You chose to live beyond your means. I chose to enable it. That ends now. For the first time, she faltered. Words caught in her throat. David sat back, rubbing his temples, the weight of reality pressing on him. Half your retirement? He whispered. Mom, I never thought. He trailed off, shame creeping into his voice. I softened slightly, but not enough to undo the boundary I had drawn. You never asked. You just took. And I allowed it. That was my mistake. Jennifer paced the room, frustration twisting her features. We can't just lose everything. The house, the schools, the lifestyle. It will all crumble. I met her gaze squarely. Then let it. Sometimes, things must crumble before anything real can be built again. David finally looked at me, his eyes rimmed with something raw, almost like the boy I remembered. What about the children? He asked softly. They didn't do anything wrong. My heart tightened, but I held firm. No, they didn't. And I will always love them. But my support will not flow through you anymore. If I help, it will be directly for them, not to maintain your lifestyle. Jennifer shook her head, muttering under her breath, but David was silent. The folder sat heavy between us, a ledger not just of money, but of years lost. And for once, I was not afraid of its weight. When they finally left, David clutched the folder in his hands like a man carrying evidence of his own undoing. Jennifer didn't look back. At the door, David paused, bound by memories of loss and years of giving. Maybe I could start again, in a place untouched by obligation, a place where the sound of waves might drown out the echoes of disappointment. The seed had been planted. The idea of escape came to me like a tide, gentle at first, then relentless. After David and Jennifer left with the folder clutched in his hands, the condo felt too small, too haunted by the echoes of their demands. That night, I dreamt of water. Waves against rocks, salt in the air, the steady hum of something larger than grief or obligation. When I woke, Robert's old note still lay on the side table. Find the water. It tells the truth. Perhaps it was finally time to listen. I called Richard, the financial advisor who had been Robert's friend for decades. His voice carried the patience of someone who had seen too many lives whittled down by misplaced loyalty. Martha, he said gently, you've drained over half your savings, but you still have options. If you cut the transfers completely, you can live comfortably. Maybe not lavishly, but securely. Secure. The word felt foreign, like a luxury I had forgotten existed. He helped me restructure what was left, cancel the automatic transfers officially, and lay out a plan. The chains had been financial, but they had been emotional too, and both were breaking. On a whim, I drove past a real estate office. The window was lined with glossy posters of homes I knew I couldn't afford, sprawling mansions with manicured lawns. But then I saw something simpler, almost hidden in the corner. Pastel cottages near the coast, each with a wraparound porch and a promise of quiet. I walked inside before I could talk myself out of it. A young agent named Brenda greeted me with a smile that felt uncalculated. Looking for anything specific? She asked. My voice shook only slightly. Something peaceful, something by the ocean. Brenda pulled up photos on her computer. The cottages in Sea Pines were modest. 2-bedroom homes with screened porches and small gardens. Nothing flashy, nothing grand, but in every image, the horizon held the steady line of blue water. It's about 2 hours. 2. Brenda smiled knowingly. Many of our residents are here after big changes in life. Divorce, loss, starting over. You won't be alone in that. Walking through that cottage, I felt something loosen. The rooms were smaller than the house I'd once given up, but they didn't echo with absence. They felt like possibility. The kitchen wasn't large enough for catered spreads, but it was exactly right for soup simmering on the stove and cookies cooling on the counter. The porch seemed to wait for evenings of books and ocean breezes. Every corner whispered a truth I had buried under obligations. I was still alive, and it wasn't too late to live differently. I could choose a home that was mine, not one I financed for others. That night back at the condo, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I brewed tea and stood at the window, picturing the cottage instead of the street lamps outside. For once, my future wasn't about managing someone else's crises. It was about envisioning my own days. The image of the yellow cottage by the water grew sharper with each sip. I could almost hear Robert's laugh echo in those walls. Imagine Emma and Jack chasing gulls while I watched from the porch. The thought didn't sting. It soothed. It reminded me of who I had been before obligation hollowed me out. I began to prepare, quietly. I listed items to sell, sorted through closets, and stacked boxes in corners. Each box was more than clutter. It was a statement. The condo had been a compromise, a space chosen out of pressure. Sea Pines would be a choice, my choice. The more I planned, the more I felt the fear dissolve into resolve. I didn't know if David and Jennifer would ever understand, but for the first time, that wasn't the point. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about reclaiming my name from the word ATM and putting it back on my own front door. I knew the confrontation with David and Jennifer wasn't finished. They would resist, plead, accuse. But now I had an answer that didn't need their approval. My life wasn't theirs to budget. Their holidays weren't mine to finance. And my future wasn't a safe
passes through David or Jennifer. His eyes softened. That's wise, Martha. Protective, but fair. We structured the accounts carefully. The trust would cover tuition through college, with conditions. Good grades, direct payment to schools, no discretionary withdrawals. It wasn't generosity without boundaries. It was a gift with rails to keep it from derailing. I imagined Emma's shy smile when she discovered books waiting for her. Jack's bright eyes and a robotics lab he might not otherwise afford. For the first time in years, I felt like I was giving not out of guilt, but out of clarity. This was love without strings attached to Jennifer's manicured fingers or David's pleading voice. This was mine to give on my terms. The next confrontation came swiftly. David called, confusion heavy in his tone. Mom, the lawyer says you've set up trusts for the kids. Why didn't you tell us first? I answered calmly, because it isn't your money. It's theirs. And I don't need your permission to protect my grandchildren. Jennifer's voice flared in the background, sharp as glass. So you'll pay for them but leave us drowning? That's cruel! I almost laughed. No, Jennifer. What's cruel is raising children to believe appearances matter more than stability. What's cruel is asking me to fund luxuries while erasing me from the family table. Jennifer stormed over the next day, her anger too large to fit through my small doorway. This is insulting, she spat. We should decide what's best for our kids, not you. I met her fury with silence, then handed her the trust documents. Read them. The only thing this guarantees is their education, nothing else. Their future isn't yours to gamble anymore. For a moment, her mask slipped. Fear flickered across her face, quickly buried beneath disdain. You think you can buy their love? She sneered. I shook my head. No, Jennifer. I'm making sure they never have to buy mine. That night, Emma called me herself. Her voice was timid, but hopeful. Dad said you made something for us. Does that mean I can still go to Westlake? That I can still read in the library with my friends? I swallowed the lump. To you or Jennifer, that time is finished. He nodded slowly, shame flickering in his expression. I understand. It was the first honest acknowledgement I'd heard from him in years. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jennifer remained a storm. She called less, but when she did, her words dripped with bitterness. Enjoy your little coastal retirement, she sneered once. The kids will know who really raised them.
I let her words fall to the floor, uncollected. The children knew the truth already. They had seen who baked the cookies no one served, who bought the gifts no one thanked, who smiled at the table no one made room for. And now they would see who fought for their future without demanding applause. Love doesn't need an audience. It needs resolve. And I finally had plenty of that. For years, I had been the hidden stream under their foundation, unseen and unthanked. But a stream uncontrolled eventually floods. Now I was carving a new channel, one that flowed directly into the lives of those who mattered. Emma and Jack didn't need a grandmother who erased herself for their parents. They needed one who stood tall, who showed them that love isn't measured by money given in silence, but by the courage to say enough. With every signature on those trust documents, I wasn't just saving their education. I was reclaiming my dignity. And maybe, just maybe, teaching them to guard theirs. The cracks in their perfect facade began to widen once the money stopped flowing. Within weeks, the mortgage company sent warnings, and the school threatened to withhold registration unless tuition was paid. David's voice on the phone was different now. Tired, strained, not the confident son who once paraded success. "Mom, we've put the house on the market," he admitted one evening, the words sounding like defeat. The Tudor-style dream that my retirement had built was unraveling, and I felt no urge to stop it. A house financed by denial was never truly theirs to begin with. Jennifer raged at the changes. Downsizing was humiliation in her world, a visible scar on the image she worked so hard to polish. "We can't move into some middle-class neighborhood," she snapped at David one night, her voice neither rescuing nor condemning, simply observing as the reality I had shielded them from finally pressed down. They had discovered what it meant to live within their means, a lesson most people learn much earlier in life. It wasn't graceful, but it was necessary. The children adjusted more quickly than their parents. Emma, though sad at first, found a place in the public school's advanced literature program, thriving in ways she hadn't expected. She told me about new friends who shared her love for books, about a teacher who encouraged her writing. Jack, ever the curious one, joined the robotics club, his eyes lighting up as he described building small machines with his classmates. They no longer lived in a gilded cage of privilege funded by silence. They were discovering resilience, and I quietly rejoiced at their adaptability. Sometimes children carry change more bravely than adults. My relationship with David began to thaw. He called once a week, his tone still halting but less defensive. Our conversations tiptoed at first. Updates on the children, cautious questions about my new plans. Slowly, cracks appeared in his armor. One evening, he said softly, "I didn't realize how much you gave up. I should have asked." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first step. I accepted it without fanfare. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures, but in small acknowledgments that you were seen, at last, after years of invisibility. Jennifer remained distant, her resentment simmering. She avoided our calls, left the room when David tried to include me on video chats. But I didn't chase her approval anymore. Her absence hurt less than her presence had when it was filled with contempt. I focused on the children, on their laughter when they visited, on Emma's excitement about her latest story, on Jack's robot that scooted across my kitchen floor during a weekend visit. Their joy was the repayment I never expected, a quiet proof that love had not been erased, only waiting for its chance to breathe again. When I finally signed papers for the cottage in Sea Pines, the relief was overwhelming. My condo went on the market, and I spent evenings packing boxes with deliberate care. Every object I wrapped was a choice, what I would carry into my new life and what I would leave behind with the years of silent sacrifice. The yellow cottage wasn't just a house. It was a declaration that my story wasn't gratitude for money. It was gratitude for stability, for opportunity. I nodded, accepting it as enough. It wasn't everything I deserved, but it was more than I had received in years. Sometimes enough is all the heart needs. The distance between us hadn't vanished, but it was changing shape. Where there had once been dependence and entitlement, there was now a tentative respect. I didn't delude myself into thinking Jennifer's scorn would soften quickly, or that David's shame would heal overnight. But the foundation had shifted, no longer built on my silence. It stood on the truth of boundaries set and held. As I looked at the boxes stacked high, I felt no sorrow, only anticipation. For once, the story was turning toward me, not away. And that was a future worth carrying into the salt air. The night before I left for Sea Pines, a sharp knock rattled my condo door. I expected David, but when I opened it, the entire family stood there. David tense, Jennifer rigid, the children huddled close. Emma broke free first, throwing her arms around me. "Grandma, I missed you!" Her warmth nearly undid me, but behind her, Jennifer's eyes burned with accusation. They filed inside, the silence broken only by Jack's small gasp at the half-packed boxes. Jennifer wasted no time. "So this is it? Running away to the beach while we lose everything?" Her tone dripped with disdain, as if my pursuit of peace were betrayal. David's voice carried less anger but more desperation. "Mom, the mortgage company is threatening foreclosure. The school's about to cut the kids. We can't keep up." His words, laced with panic, might once have broken me. Now they only confirmed the inevitable. I gestured calmly to the sofa. "Sit. We need to talk." The children shuffled off reluctantly when Jennifer snapped at them to leave. Their laughter from my bedroom was a faint reminder of innocence amid chaos. Jennifer paced the room like a caged animal. "We built our lives on this house, on this school. You can't just pull out now." I looked her straight in the eye. "Correction, Jennifer. You built your lives on my money. I enabled it. That stops tonight." Her face twisted.
Realize things had him the folder I had kept. Every transfer, every receipt, every loan. $276,000. That's what I've given since your father died. Half my retirement. Did you really think it came without a cost? David flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each line. "I had no idea," he whispered. Jennifer peered over his shoulder, her indignation crumbling into disbelief. "This can't be right." I met her gaze coolly. "It's exact. Every number is real. Every sacrifice documented." She faltered, but then muttered, "Well, it was your choice. No one forced you." David shot her a warning look, but she held her chin high. I didn't rise to the bait. "Yes, my choice. A mistake I'm correcting. I'll no longer bankroll your lifestyle. If you want the house, earn it. If you want the schools, pay for them. My part is over." David's voice cracked. "But the children, what about them?" For the first time, I softened. "They're innocent. That's why I've established education trusts in their names. Their schooling is secure, directly, without passing through your hands." Jennifer's mouth fell open. "So you'll still pay for them?" "I'll secure their education," I clarified. "That is different from securing your image." David swallowed hard, a mix of gratitude and shame washing over him. "Thank you for the kids," he murmured, the words breaking like fragile glass. It was the first genuine gratitude I'd heard in years, but it was enough to pierce the distance. The room thickened with unspoken truths. Jennifer's arms crossed tighter, her silence louder than words. David clutched the folder as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. For once, the power dynamic had shifted. Not me begging for inclusion, but them confronting the mirror of their own dependence. They stood to leave, the children summoned from my bedroom. Emma hugged me fiercely. "Grandma, can we still visit you? Even at the beach?" I knelt to her level, tears burning my eyes. "Always, sweetheart. My door is open to you. Always. Jack nodded, his small voice steady. I want to see the ocean. As they walked out, beginning, I had left behind a condo filled with memories of sacrifice and silence, trading it for a home where every corner whispered of choice, not obligation. The porch swing creaked softly, a companion in my solitude, and for the first time in years, I felt free to claim my mornings, my peace, my life. Freedom was not loud, it was steady, like the tide. Life in Sea Pines settled into a gentle rhythm. I joined a small book club at the community center, where retired teachers, widows, and even an old Navy officer shared laughter over coffee-stained novels. Harriet, my neighbor, dropped by with mystery books tucked under her arm, insisting I would enjoy them. Ben, a widower with a garden as wild as his stories, taught me how to coax roses from sandy soil. These friendships were not transactional, not tethered to what I could provide. They were simple, mutual, born out of shared evenings and unhurried talks. For once, I belonged without paying for my seat. David called once a week now, his voice carrying less tension and more humility. Our conversations were careful, but honest. He spoke about his new job, about budgeting, about learning to live smaller but steadier. It's strange, he admitted once, but the kids seem happier. Emma's thriving at her school. Jack can't stop talking about his robots. His voice cracked. We should have done this sooner. I didn't gloat, didn't remind him how long I had warned him silently with my weariness. I simply said, I'm glad you're finding your way. Sometimes love means letting someone stumble into truth rather than dragging them to it. Jennifer was slower to change. She rarely appeared on calls, her resentment clinging like a stubborn shadow. But I noticed small cracks forming. Once, during a brief video chat, she hesitated before saying, "Thank you for the education trusts." The words were stiff, reluctant, but they were words I never expected. I accepted them with grace, not because they were enough, but because they were a start. Forgiveness does not come all at once. It comes in fragile syllables, in gestures too small to measure, in pauses where once there were only accusations. I was willing to wait, for the children's sake, if nothing else. Emma and Jack became my anchors. They visited here this year. My heart skipped. I glanced at David during one of our calls, waiting. His voice was steady. If the invitation's open, Mom, we'd like to. I felt tears sting, but forced a smile. It's always open. That holiday was the first in years without catering, without debt disguised as luxury. We decorated a small tree with seashells and homemade ornaments. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, vegetables, cookies baked with too much sugar. But it was ours. We ate on the porch as the sun set, laughter rising louder than any carols. During dessert, Jennifer surprised me. She set her fork down and cleared her throat. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. About excluding you, about everything. It was unkind. The table fell silent. I studied her face, waiting for the mockery that usually followed. None came. For the first time, sincerity softened her sharpness. I nodded slowly. Thank you, Jennifer. That means more than you know. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a bridge, shaky and narrow, stretching across years of bitterness. Sometimes healing begins not with grand gestures, but with one trembling step forward. As the evening faded, David lingered on the porch, his gaze on the horizon. Mom, I don't know if I'll ever make up for what we put you through. I placed my hand over his. You don't have to make up for it, David. You just have to learn from it. His eyes glistened. I'm trying. I believed him. We sat in silence, the ocean filling the spaces where words would have once been demands. For the first time, I saw not the boy who had taken and taken, but a man who was beginning, at last, to stand on his own. That night, after everyone left, I returned to the porch swing. The stars pricked the dark sky. The waves kept their eternal rhythm.
and I felt the story close around me. At brunch, my daughter-in-law had once said, "We've decided not to invite you for Christmas." That wound had cut me deeply. But now, sitting in my seaside home with flowers still on the table and children's laughter echoing in my ears, I knew the truth. They had not invited me then because I had not yet invited myself into my...
Together, we can remind one another that family is not built on silence or money, but on honesty, boundaries, and the courage to say enough. And I'll see you again, right here by the ocean, for the next story that proves love is strongest when it's true.